Hello, everyone. Welcome to UMD Media Show. UMD Media works on understanding, measuring, and doing, and it strives to contribute for an evidence-rich discourse and decision-making in the Horn of Africa. Today, it's my great pleasure to converse with Dr. Tsegaye Ararssa on Quo Vadis, Oromia. So we'll try to paint the political landscape of Oromia today, and perhaps also have an insight on what could come in the next months and years. Dr. Tsegaye, it's my great pleasure to have you back again. Welcome to UMD again.
To be conversing with you. Thank you, Gitch.
Awesome. So the topic we have is Quo Vadis, Oromia. And I know it's Oromia itself, geographically, demographically, politically, is huge, even in the context of, the larger Horn of Africa. But our effort is to just create at least some level of, to shed some light into that bigger picture. So maybe one thing that could start our conversation is what was today on the foreign affairs, foreign policy, actually. So how Abiy Ahmed betrayed Oromia and endangered Ethiopia. So maybe if you were to paint shortly a picture of where Oromia is right now, let's start from the challenge, the political challenge in Oromia. What would that picture look like?
Wonderful. It's very interesting that you brought up Milkesa's article of today in Foreign Policy. And I just looked at the title and I was sharing it on Twitter just a minute ago. And I was saying Abiy did not only betray Oromia, but started the war of elimination first in Oromia before he started the genocidal war in Tsegaye. And I think Milkesa, as an insider, of course, understands the, as an insider of the regime, a former insider of the regime, he understands how at different points since 2018, Abiy has gone off track from the reform that was sought in 2014, 2018. Now, the question you framed, Quo Vadis Oromia, is a big question. And obviously the interpolated one in there is Oromia. And I am not responding as Oromia, it's Oromia who had to respond. Oromia, where are you going is the question. And of course, I do not speak as Oromia, but I respond as a participant observer of the politics and the dynamics in Oromia and in the wider Ethiopia. The question is, I think, makes us think about 3 or 4 relatively smaller questions. First, where are we at now? As you also asked me, I'll come back to that question. Where are we at now? How did we get here? And what exactly do we want? What does the Oromo want? And where are we? How are we going to achieve that? Is the question. But first, your question: where are we at this point in time? What are the major challenges? I think that's a very important question. As you know, at this point in time, Oromia is at war. And the war has started overtly in 2019, when the attempt to disarm the OLA by Abiy was launched and went on to transform itself into a structural violence when they started to designate OLA as a terrorist group. And then, of course, they mobilized first disparate military operations, but later on a full-fledged war with a state of emergency. And recently they started a full-fledged drone attack using air guns and all those kinds of things. Also, on the ground, there are thousands and thousands of politicians and suspected supporters of the OLA who are being arrested, harassed, and detained. There has been the crackdown on all political leaders since 2019. At the time Hachalu Hundessa was assassinated. Way before even 2019, there was a targeted killing of political leaders, students, university professors, and on and on. I think we believe that Oromia is facing a comprehensive war since 2018. The comprehensive war actually targets Oromo nationalists for assassination, for arrest and detention, arbitrary detention, for banishment to exile, for prosecution, and all sorts of harassments. And that's number one: attack, banish, arrest, assassinate, prosecute Oromo nationalists, including political leaders. The second category of this war is the attempt at eradicating Oromo identity, Oromoness, Oromoma. And you can just go to have a glance at some of the headlines of 360, for example, or ISAT, etc., Ahadu Media, or any of the Ethiopian media outlets, By Media, Srat Media, etc. You will talk about how Oromoma, Oromo identity, is a threat to the longevity of the Ethiopian state and therefore has to be banished or completely eradicated. So your identity is threatened, your nationalism is threatened, or nationalists are threatened. And thirdly, they want to dismember the Oromia region as an entity. Oromia region is the locus of sovereignty for Oromos, the locus of statehood. It is the ultimate expression of the legal personality of the Oromo nation as a people. And they want to contest that. They want to undo the federal structure and rearrange the regions in the name of overcoming divisive politics that TPLF encouraged in the last 27 years, they say. Now, so if you target Oromia for dismemberment, if you target Oromo nationalists for attack and elimination, if you target Oromoma as an identity, you know, being proud of one's Oromo identity through expressing your culture, through utilizing your language, and through expressing your national aspiration as such, then they really don't want us. And this is the continuation of the imperial othering of Oromos within the Ethiopian state. So the current war should be understood in its historical perspective, and the current attack simply has to be seen in the light of what went on when first Oromia was incorporated into the empire in the 19th century. But I will not go into that now. Right now, what are the specific challenges that the Oromo nation is facing? As we said, the Oromo political leaders have been imprisoned. Only a handful of them have been released last week, and most likely for purposes of not reconciliation and healing the wounded nation, but for co-optation. so for co-optation into whatever they call national dialogue, or into the system, in order to calm down the itching Oromia nation and mobilize support from Oromia to prosecute the war in Tigray. As you know, most of the generals, including the deputy chief of staff, recently said only chapter 1 is concluded. There will be a chapter 2, and we'll go into Mekelle again, and we will eliminate our enemies. That's literally what he said. Now, so the Oromo political leaders have been imprisoned, and the rallying cry of the Oromo nation, especially in the diaspora, as you know, is release all Oromo political leaders. That's number one. Number two, there is a war going on in Wallaga, in the Ambo area in the central Shoa, central and central west Shoa today. And in that war, the entire new commando army of the Ethiopian National Defense Force was mobilized. In fact, when chapter 1 of the war in Tigray has been concluded, they have brought all of their attention to Oromia, and they have now started a full-fledged attack on the west and central part of Oromia. And very soon they have planned to start another war in the southern part of Oromia by using the Somali region special forces, the Sidama region special forces, and the Somali forces from outside through the Dolo-Ado, Dolo-Bai continuum. Now, so there is this war, and the most important challenge is, how do we stop this war? How do we disarm the formal and informally mobilized warlords that are trying to destabilize Oromia and dispossess the people of their land and displace the people by, forcing them to leave the areas? As you know, the Amhara special forces and the Amhara settlers in various parts of Oromia, in Western Oromia, in Wallo Oromo, in various parts of Oromia, such as in the Karayu area, they go, make a raid, burn down towns, and displace people. So there are formally waged wars by the government. There are informally sponsored and outsourced wars by other armed forces. So one of the biggest challenges is, how do we put the guns down? And thirdly, it's not just the formal conventional war with the Ethiopian National Defense Force. It's not just the attack from the Amhara Special Forces and the Amhara Fano, cross-border attacks. There is the drone attack, particularly focusing on Western Oromia, the Wallo Oromia part, which is of course in the Amhara National Regional State, by the way, and in the central parts of Oromia. The drone attacks, the machine guns from the air, these are really bringing about massive murders of civilians. They burn homes, they burn harvests, they burn huts, they burn entire cities, markets, schools, not military places, military combat areas. And this is very tragic, and this has to stop. The other problem we have is, particularly in the southern part of Oromia, there is this massive man-made as well as natural drought-driven famine. And how do we get humanitarian aid for these people? And the government is deliberately exposing people to starvation and perish in the famine, whether it is man-made, like it is in the case in the Guji area, the Borana area, or naturally, drought-driven, like it is in the Arsi and Karayu area. Why are they doing that? They say the people will succumb to the Ethiopian National Defense Force and ignore their attention to ignore the Oromo Liberation Army if they starve. So by starvation, starvation and famine is being used as a political weapon to win the people from their opponents. And so one of the most important and most pressing challenge is that people are suffering from famine and drought, and they don't have humanitarian aid, access to humanitarian aid. I think that is going to be a huge challenge. Number 4, considering the fact that politically nowadays the national Identity and Border Commission has drawn up prepared a new map of Ethiopia in which they have divided Oromia into 5 major regions like Hararge, Showa, Wallagga, Wollo, South Oromia, and so on and so forth, Ilubabor, Jimma, 5 major regions. So the breaking up of Oromia and the dismemberment of Oromia as a legal personality, as an entity, has started. And of course, they did not want to, talk about it in Parliament publicly because they were just trying to gauge the reaction of the people. And they said we didn't issue it formally. Given the fact that this kind of preparation has been going on, and Abiy Ahmed has been very much clear about this, unequivocal about this for a long time, and given the fact that there are incursions into the territory of Oromia by all sorts of armed forces from neighboring regions, and this intent to occupy the cities of Oromia and alienate the cities from the Oromia region. I think one of the challenges of Oromia today is securing the territorial integrity and the state sovereignty, regional sovereignty of Oromia. So these are the major political challenges. And then, of course, law and order has broken down. There is lack of, administrative and social service flow since this war has started. A breakdown of cities, a breakdown of utilities, a breakdown of social services is everywhere. And you don't know who is going to attack you. Law and order doesn't exist. And pacifying the entire region and creating stability is important. And apart from that, there are displacements, refugeehood, Oromos repatriated from, for example, to prisons in Saudi Arabia and various countries in the Middle East, such as Lebanon. They come back. If they are young men who are able-bodied, they are mobilized to the war in Tigray. They're taken into training camps. Some of them are left in the cities if they are not cooperative. Some of them are taken to prison. And the ones that are in Saudi Arabia today are still crying, and no government is trying to address their concerns. And one of the things we do in JIRA, which is a permanent humanitarian fund for Oromos, which I run from Australia here, is to do a humanitarian advocacy for these kinds of people trapped between sovereignties. The Ethiopian government doesn't care about them, and the Saudi government focuses on its own national interest and the illegality of their presence in their country. And they're left, falling, they are found now falling between the cracks of sovereignty. They are not here, they are not there, and they are subjected to all sorts of atrocities in some ways. So these are the major challenges. And then, of course, the political space. The political space, concomitant with the war, has been closed down, especially after the beginning of the arrest of the political parties, and the political parties are completely driven out of the political space, especially in the build-up towards the election that was no election in 2021. So again, the political parties' offices are closed. Thousands and thousands of cadres and operatives of the Oromo Federalist Congress and the Oromo Liberation Front are arrested, and they are detained and subjected to arbitrary, actually living in places that are unknown, and their status is not yet known. And the leader of the Oromo Liberation Front, Daud Ibsa, is under house arrest. And these are the major challenges. And today, key political figures of the Oromo Federalist Forces, such as Jawar Mohammed, Bakala Garba, etc., are released, but their safety is not secure. They don't have security details still. They have to rely on the government security forces, and their place of abode is not their own, and their bank accounts are still not activated. Their houses are not safe for various reasons because the government forces have been raiding them. And the Oromo public is so worried about the safety, literally the safety of the life, of these two important political leaders today. And to date, None of them have addressed, it's been over a week now since they have been released. They have not directly spoken to the media. They have issued a statement that is not really a statement through the political party, kind of playing it very safe vis-a-vis the regime. And Jawar is reported to have said that he will be making a decision and coming out to speak to the media in 2 to 3 weeks' time. And we're waiting for how he's going to handle it. Obviously, he's not happy about the situation. He did not want to speak to even the people. He did not speak to his supporters. He did not speak to the various officials. I think there are other people who have negotiated the peace deal on their behalf with Abiy. And basically, the brokers want Abiy's regime to continue. And the best way to continue his tenure is by releasing these key political leaders, which helps to kind of placate the itching Oromia region, and also possibly find a way to co-opt at least the OFC and rally them behind him in his war, and continue at least for the coming 3 or 4 years. So these are very tactical moves that Abiy has made when he released them. And obviously, Jawar and Mekelle are not very happy about this. They are not very excited to meet the media. They are not even doing any celebration, as you have seen so far. And the people are not celebrating. And that tells you the level of pain and pathology that the Ethiopian and Oromo political landscape is containing within the body politic. It's not even living with it. It's like containing it, and they don't know exactly how it goes. Now, on the part of the Oromo resistors, as you know, the Oromo nation, I say for the entire history, but particularly today, the Oromo nation is just doing 2 things: surviving and resisting empire, surviving and resisting imperial violence and the afterlife, the after effects of imperial war. And as a survivor, we are condemned to defend ourselves, and the Oromo Liberation Army is fighting for its, for the life of Oromia. And this, of course, has now become very strong, and then they have been conducting conventional confrontations with Abiy's Ethiopian National Defense Forces and the Eritrean forces who are deployed in western parts of the country. A new airstrip has been established in Asosa, Benishangul Gumuz, so that the drones can take off from there to attack the Wallagga region. But in all of the operations that the Ethiopian National Defense Force has conducted so far in Mandi, Begi, in Gidami, and some other towns have completely been foiled by the Oromo Liberation Army. As you know, the Oromo Liberation Army has also formed an alliance with the TDF, the Tigray Defense Forces, and they have started to train together and train staff in thousands now. Joint trainings have started, and joint operations are going to be launched if Tigray's forces invitation to give peace a chance. They retreat. Their retreat to their own region is to give peace a chance once more. And Abiy is not interested in negotiating with them. He talks about national dialogue in the absence of the TDF and the OLA. And if Abiy continues to launch what he calls Chapter 2 of his war against Tigray and continues his war on Oromia, the joint operations of the TDA and OLA and the United Front of Federalists and Confederalists will continue to start. I mean, it will start very soon in about 10 days, they say, but that will, I think, get us back to another dreary times, another set of another difficult war that will continue to claim many thousands of lives in Oromia. But in the end, of course, Oromia and Tigray and all the oppressed peoples of Ethiopia will prevail because they've got justice, and empire doesn't stand in the face of people who are fighting for their life.
Great, thank you. That's a good big picture painting of what's happening in Oromia and when it started, how it started. Now, maybe in terms of when and how it started, there are people who pin that timeline into the assassination, killing of Hachalu Hundessa. Let me just play this one, and we can relate to the article on FP today as well, how Abiy clearly identified the Kero and the Kare, or the youth in general in Oromia, are the most potent, dangerous element to his power. So let's play this one.
Hundreds were killed, thousands arrested. The government shut down the country's internet, arrested opposition politicians, and silenced some opposition TV stations.
There was almost a black and white threat by the Prime Minister against the media I'm running and myself.
Critics say Abiy's government has effectively removed its competition for votes in Ethiopia's largest state, Oromia, and the election will no longer be free and fair.
This is from June 2021, but the article today on foreign policy by Milkesa, actually he refers, as he said, he's an insider, or he was an insider. So he's referring to a central committee meeting they had, and where he compares the Kero, the unarmed Kero, with the OLA, and Abiy clearly in the meeting declaring the Kero is #1 potential threat to his power. Many of us were shocked. This is Milkesa saying. And he compares them, demonizing them into ungovernable pestilence that must be dealt with as soon as possible. So I think that's where people can maybe pinpoint into his purposeful decision to kill or to destabilize, neutralize what he characterized as the more dangerous enemy. So my point is, we don't hear a lot, because we hear about, of course, the most prominent figures when they are arrested, what's happening to them, and also when they are released. But tell us about the maybe tens of thousands of youths that are arrested. You mentioned about also co-opting. I know they also use religious elements in this neutralizing, saying it's a sinful act to be political. I mean, this is the same movement, the youth movement, is that brought Abiy to power. So would you spend some time in, again, helping our audience understand the Kero, their role, and where they are now? Because we are trying to understand the dynamics behind, the prominent figures that we see on screens.
Right. I think the war actually started earlier on, from the moment when Abiy Ahmed rejected to sign the peace deal they had secured with the OLF in Asmara. The negotiator at the time was Lamma Magarsa, the president of the then president of the Oromia National Regional State. But once he has secured the deal and went to Finfinne and asked Abiy to agree to that, he said, "I'm not going to agree to the terms of their deal." What was the term of the deal that he didn't accept? Number one, the issue of integration of the Oromo Liberation Army into the National Army, or at least to the Oromia National Regional Security Forces system, i.e. the intelligence, the Oromia police. By then they didn't have a special force, so to these groups. And the second is about securing freedom and fair compensation for the political officials that have been staying with the Oromo Oromo Liberation Forces for ages. And then, of course, absolute freedom and security reform, the reform of the Ethiopian National Defense Force and the national security and intelligence system, because that system was established and has been long operating to attack its #1 internal enemy, which is the Oromo Liberation Front, and the ONLF, the Ogaden National Liberation Front. These were the two major categories of people considered to be terrorists, and the entire security intelligence infrastructure was geared towards attacking, harassing, controlling, containing, and doing surveillance upon these kinds of people. So one of the elements of the negotiation with the Oromo Liberation Front, led by Daoud Ibsa in Asmara, was that they will pledge a complete security and defense, national defense force reform. And immediately Abiy said, and of course, release of the thousands of Oromos who have been arrested on the suspicion that they are supporters of the OLF and therefore have been subjected to terrorism trials for a long time. And of course, the release of political prisoners was done along with the release of all forms of political prisoners, although most of them have again been rearrested, and to date they suffer from arbitrary detention in the prison cells of Oromia in Ethiopia, the wider Ethiopia. Now, Abiy was not happy. Of course, he talks about the language of reform of the security and national defense force, etc. But that was about purging the people associated in their view with TPLF or ethnic Tagarus or TPLF. So to that extent, it is reform. And to replace them by the Amhara elite within the regime, the NDM elite, that is as much as the reform goes. So whoever goes against this kind of reform either is subjected to assassination, like the chief of staff himself, partly suspected of assassination because of the way he wanted to preserve the distance and distance of the army from the politics and its professionalism and so on and so forth. So security reform meant purging the system from Tagarus and from military officials and security officials of Tigrayan origin, and replacement of them by the Amhara elite. Not reforming it in such a way that it stops to identify, categorize, contain, and control and attack the Oromo and the ONLF and other adversaries of the Ethiopian state. So that's one of the reasons he was kind of not very happy, not warm about the homecoming of the OLF. As you know, when the day the OLF came to Finfinne, there was a huge violence, most of it fomented by the Zen Gimbot Sabat group, which now is called the Izema, Ethiopians for Citizenship, whatever. So that group is orchestrating the violence from the city, but Abiy has valorized it. Abiy has deliberately encouraged it because he knew that as long as Cairo is not in support of him, Cairo has its allegiance to Jawar and the others, then his seat is not secure. He knew that he can never be secure in Oromia as long as the Cairo is accountable to somebody else than himself. And then there is this OLF group. He didn't know he has complete antipathy, against this group from very young age. And in fact, he went into politics and into the intelligence only to persecute the OLF. And he was not happy, and he did not welcome them. And I was saying, when Daoud Ibsa and the group came back to Ethiopia, just like the federal authorities went and welcomed the other opposition groups, like the Branu Nagga and Dargacho Tsegaye and on. I think it was the federal government officials who were supposed to welcome them. But in the case of Daoud Ibsa, it was Oromia region that came out to welcome them. And the signal is that these are not our guests. These are not the people who made a deal with us. It is the regional. And later it was already being discussed in National Electoral Board about whether to register the OLF as a country-wide party or as a region-wide party. That was even... So the issue of Oromia is a regional matter left to Lemma. The issue of Ethiopians is for Abiy to deal with. So the Daoud Ibsa, however, has been at war with Ethiopia. The Oromo Liberation Front, the Oromo Liberation Army, has been fighting the Ethiopian state, not the Oromia regional state. The peace that was made with Ethiopia, not with Oromia regional state. And yet, they did not welcome them. In fact, they mobilized their supporters against the people who wanted to make sure that the welcome is warm and festive. Okay. And number two, they did not even show a gesture of approaching them, discussing the terms of the deal and signing it formally, and then getting into the process of implementing the decisions in the agreement. And when that is not coming through, the OLF forces were itching. And it was an attempt to kind of marginalize them, exclude them. And while this is going on, the Qero that were mobilized out for many years now were already itching. And there was a war going on, a border war around the Oromia Somali region, and the country was unstable. And the Qero was calling for Abiy to do something to intervene against the death of our people. And that was one of the lyrics that Hachalu aired during the visit of Eritrean president to Ethiopia, where they were having that big festive party. And Hachalu was basically assassinated because he was speaking the voice of the Qero and Kare of Oromia for a long time. Now, Abiy was obviously unhappy. In fact, Abiy's war against Oromia started the moment he assumed power, and he started to invoke the language of imperial politics when he talked about the return to the glory of the olden days, the inaugural speech. And then he talked about the grandeur of the Ethiopian state during Menelican times and Haile Selassie's times and the Derg times and so on and so forth. And then when he began to renew statues and buildings and imperial statues and so on and so forth. And immediately when he began to say Oromo nationalism is dangerous for Ethiopia, Oromo nationalism has actually diminished Oromos and divided the country. And when he started this targeted attack on Oromo nationalists. Now, then, even within the party, the discussion was how to demobilize Qero and Kare, because they couldn't take them under their arms, under their wings. So they felt insecure about the Qero and Kare. So one of the things that he does is he outsources the violence to the Fano and the Ethiopianist camp in order to attack the Qero. And there was a global movement, a global Ethio-Amhara political elites movement campaign, basically, social media campaign as well, to designate the Qero as a terrorist organization, to disband the Qero as an organization. It's not an organization. They said they are like the Al-Shabaab of Oromia and so on and so forth. They are a terrorist organization. They want to establish an Islamic Republic. And this is to exploit the Islamophobic sensibility of the West. And they did all sorts of things to label the Qero as a terrorist, violent group. When at no point in time, Qero and Kare has taken up arms. At no point in time has Jawar called for a violent political move against the regime in Ethiopia. Now, the attempt then was first to try to make peace with Jawar, an apparent peace outwardly, so that by supporting Jawar, Qero would also support Lemma and Abiy. But the day Abiy lost the support of the Oromo nation and the entire Qero group was the day when he kicked Lemma and the group that was the entourage, the Opidio group that supported Lemma, such as the author of the article on foreign policy today, Milkesa Midaga. Now, these people were completely purged from Opidio immediately, and then they were in fact accused of being very much close to Jawar. And then you remember, as soon as Lemma and the group were pushed out of the scene, the assassination attempt on Jawar began. And that obviously created a huge animosity between Abiy on the one hand and Kero and Karre Oromo. And it didn't stop there. And then Jawar had to be forced to go into politics rather than activism. And he went into a political party, and a very peaceful political party, which is the Oromo Federalist Congress. Once he went into it, the threat in fact increased. And Abiy started to work towards not having the election that was planned for 2020. And they obviously wanted not just the election, but an inclusive dialogue about resolving the most outstanding questions, political questions of the country. And Abiy did not know how to silence them. The only way he has to do that is to assassinate Hachalu in late 2019 and use that as an excuse to crack down upon all political forces, including the Ethiopian political forces, such as those parties led by Lidatu Ayaleo, Iskender Nega, and on. Everyone that is generally not in agreement with Abiy Ahmed, not dancing to his beat, everyone was cracked down upon. Now, after that, what happened was, after Jawar has been arrested, the de facto leader of the Kero and Karre, the Kero was disoriented. And of course, about thousands, some people estimate them about to be 50,000, tens of thousands of Keros were arrested. In one day alone, about 6,000 were arrested and over 682 were killed in one day, and the day he was arrested. And he was arrested while trying to make peace, to stabilize the people who were angry because of the assassination of Hachalu. And he was arrested in the offices of the Oromia authorities, in the office of Shimelis Abdisa and in the presence of Mayor Takale Uma, in their presence. And they were trying to work with them how to stabilize the country. And from that time on, it was an open war. And that day I said, by killing Hachalu and by using that as an occasion to crack down upon all political forces in the country, and by arresting Jawar and Bakkala Garba and threatening to kill them and dancing over their arrest, cheering and dancing over their arrest that night, I think I said, now an open war was declared on Oromia and Oromos. And the bridge between Oromia and Ethiopia has been broken for good. And from that day on, every attempt the Oromo has made for the last many years, many decades, to redeem the empire and transform it into a more just and a fair country has been foiled for good. Now the struggle, the Oromo struggle, has to take up a different trajectory, which is a trajectory of reasserting its collective agency and determining their own destiny through the principle of the right of self-determination. So what happened to the Kero after that? They were disoriented. They were most of them were arrested and subjected to arbitrary detention for several months. And then after detention, some of them were co-opted into the system. The major tactics that Abiy used to eliminate and neutralize the Kero is, number one, tactic of coercion, killing, arresting, detaining, harassing, and banishing into exile, and prosecution, using sham political trials to disorient them. The second is co-optation, and this is the usual imperial tactic. In Ethiopia, if you look at the Menilican Empire, how it conquered Oromia, first it used war and conquest, overt violent. It's a war of extermination. Okay, it was a genocidal war that they conduct. Then, when they have managed to control them, they begin to use the politics of domination and marginalization. When even that is not working, they use assimilation, and later co-optation of the assimilated into the system and excludes the Oromo by inclusion. All right, so that was a usual tactic, and Abiy, in a classic imperial manner, used those tactics of coercion and co-optation. And so some of the Kero has been threatened to be accepting his rule and get some benefits like jobs, money, investment, land, houses, and social services. And these were some of the package, the co-optation packages that are doled out to the young people. And some of them, so they went with Abiy, and they didn't quite vocally support him. They just kept quiet. They are silenced. And the more vocal ones were subjected to arrest and detention. And the ones that are completely desperate went out to join the Oromo Liberation Army. And as you know, by 2018, the Oromo Liberation Army wasn't even as big as 100 people, personnel, had only about 100. I don't think they were even as big as 100, or probably a handful of them, And by 2020, we already have tens of thousands. By 2022, I know at least 53,000 strong are part of the Oromo Liberation Army. Where does that come from? The disaffected and disillusioned Kero, the ones who pursued the peaceful method and who only could see that their leader is arrested and detained, their friends are killed, and their country is victimized by war. So they had to go and fight for the people by joining the Oromo Liberation Army. So now the problem is the neutralized is pacified, the non-neutralized is radicalized, and the others are disoriented. This is where we are. And now that Jawar and his group has been released, and his political party, now Jawar is not an individual anymore, he's a part of a political party machine. His political party always committed to the pursuit of a peaceful political struggle. They will have to find a way of reconnecting and mobilizing the Kero to rejuvenate a peaceful political struggle as an alternative for Oromia's political problems. On the other hand, given the situation now, given the fact that we have war, given the fact that even in release, Jawar and Bakala are victims, even in release, even after their release should have been a moment of festivity and celebration. It was a moment of being silent. They are muted. So if this is what the release means, then, and if the war continues, if the attack continues, if the dismemberment of Oromia continues, if the national dialogue that they are planning excludes Oromos and Oromia and other political parties who have stakes in that country's political destiny, then I think Abiy is basically radicalizing the entire Oromo public to peg their hopes, to pin their hopes only on military solutions rather than a peaceful political deal. And we are going to see how, after surviving the shock and the hustle, Jawar and Bakala will start to articulate the future options that they have and how they can get back to reconnect with the Kero that is in the city, not yet radicalized or not yet neutralized or not yet co-opted. And of course, for me, while we watch that, the Kero who supports the Oromo Liberation Front and the Oromo Liberation Army are obviously not happy because, number one, Oromia is more threatened with a lot of attack today than ever. Number two, their political leaders are still in prison. Number three, there is a drone attack, there is a full-fledged war, a commando attack, a complete siege of the western and central parts of Oromia. And in this context, people say, no, even Jawar's release, the release of Bakala and Jawar is the result, they think, of the resistance put up by the Oromo Liberation Army. Therefore, I suspect that probably the trajectory points to a military confrontation as a way back to solution with Oromia. It's very interesting that the resistance that TDF put up against Abiy and the crushing defeat that Abiy had to entertain from the TDF, and the fact that he could not quell Oromia. He could not completely destroy the Oromo Liberation Army. And the fact that they are getting stronger and stronger by the day has led Abiy to make a retreat and find a way to make peace with Oromos and hang on to power. So already the release of Abiy Jawar and the group is a sign of the weakness and defeat of Abiy Ahmed. But once he bides the time by releasing them and placating some parts of eating Oromia, then you never know what kind of chapter 2 war he would start. So that, I think, that when that war starts, I think it will be the end of Abiy Ahmed. Of course, politically thinking, politically speaking, Abiy Ahmed is already the past. So that's what happened to Cairo. And I remember, as an anecdote, I would tell you, I live in Australia here in Melbourne, and I was working as a volunteer to assist in legal matters, in-house legal counseling services for the Oromo community here, the Australian Oromo Community Association of Victoria. And I once was confronted with a letter seeking for assistance by a young man who is an Oromo resident here. And the young man came to Australia in 2017. He was part of the Quo movement of 2015, 2017. And he went first to Norway, and then he came here and he resettled here. And because he is Quo, whenever I go around the office, he says, I'm your bodyguard here, and I'm making a security clearance here. And he's fun to talk to. And his car plate says Quo, Queero. Queerro, that's 6-digit car plate. And I think he received a letter from the Victorian Roads Authority saying, your plate, the characters in your plate are associated with violence and terrorism. Therefore, before we remove it, come and explain this to us in 14 days, within 14 days, in written. And he wanted someone to respond to this and said, how is it that this is violence? And then what we figured out was that, of course, because of privacy reasons, they did not disclose the identity of who actually complained that this is a violent terrorist name. But we found out that there was a campaign and a letter written to the Victorian Roads Authority, to the Victorian Police, and so on and so forth, by a group which calls itself Ethiopians for Peace and Advocacy. And it doesn't have any address. And then it says that it is the association of the Federation of Ethiopian Australian Community Associations in all the states. And they have been doing these kinds of campaigns, and mainly directed from America, from the DMV area, but also coordinated by groups in Switzerland, in the UK, and in Australia. They have been doing this for the last 5 years, campaigning against me, campaigning against my university, campaigning for my deportation, for my, all sorts of things. And so it is the same group that actually complained to the Victoria Roads Authority to ask the removal of that car plate, which is called Quo. And so I had to first write down the response, the response he has to give, the explanation. And then we basically said, Quo and Carre. Quo means young people, who is basically bachelor. And in the current political landscape, Quo is the youth movement that kind of resisted against some specific policy programs of the government, the master plan, etc., and that has secured the change and reform that the world celebrated by endowing Nobel Peace Prize to the Prime Minister, and so on and so forth. This is the movement that propelled Prime Minister Abiy to power, and this is the most successful, peaceful protest movement in the country. And for the first time, it kind of indicated it's possible to do a peaceful protest movement and succeed, and this cannot be associated in any manner with violence. And also, we said, if you do that here, within the youth in the Ethiopian community, Eritrean, Tigrayan, and Somali, Sudanese communities are big here. And the young people go to the same recreation centers, the same, barbershops, the same shopping malls, the same restaurants, and so on and so forth. These young people live in the same kind of environment because they inhabit the margin of the society here, the mainstream society here, because they were all black, they were all immigrants, they have the same kind of background, they come from the same cultural continuum, the Budena, the Injera cultural continuum. They go to the same barbershops, the same styles, the same clothes, go to the same market areas. They have the same, games, soccer games, and so on and so forth. And they live in interaction. And the moment this thing is taken seriously by the government, which is ignorant about the local problems, then it will pit the young people here against each other, and the violence and the brawl that comes up is not going to be contained. So we went to that, and they of course understood that this is peaceful. It's just a politically motivated defamation. And we also sought, as a lawyer, I sought the disclosure of the identity of the people who complained, and we wanted to take a civil suit against them. But before that, the police intervened and they spoke to the community leaders and they kind of calmed down the situation. So the attack on Cairo, defame and persecute and neutralize, started at home, but it has gone global after a while. It had gone global, and it has even affected me personally, as well as the youth here in Australia. So that was in part Abiy doing it at home and Abiy supporters doing it abroad. And that was what was happening.
One interesting, the attack is not, like you said, is not limited domestically, internationally, but also, there were many people, maybe we don't know the numbers, but that were killed in public, executed in public, maybe to fearmonger, in the public domain in the use. This is Amani. Can you give us a background to Amanuel? He's, I don't remember the location, but before I play the full video, can you speak to who Amanuel was?
Amanuel Wandumu is a young man who lived in Dambidolo, and he was said to be, at some point they said he was a teenager of 17 years old, and later some people were saying he's 21 or something like that. He's a young man who is an Oromo nationalist, obviously, but he was just a student. And they think that he had a brother or some family relatives, close family relative, who is a member of the Oromo Liberation Army, whose whereabouts they don't know. And they believe, because he's kind of personally is more a church-going guy, he's an Orthodox Christian, who however makes sure that he speaks out about Oromo language, how Afan Oromo has to be properly practiced even within the church compound, within the church setting, and so on and so forth, because he's kind of a little outspoken, although he's a very controlled, decent, Orthodox person. He was just a young man who is proud of his Oromo identity, and obviously he's not in support of Abiy Ahmed, and they think he's a supporter of what they call Oneg Sheni, the OLF, OLA, and they arrested him, and they said he is an OLA supporter. He is a functionary. And as you know, Dambidolo is a tough area for the government. Their operatives and their officials, sometimes their security officials, are attacked by the guerrilla tactic, the OLA forces or their wings who use a guerrilla tactic. They hit and run. And because that was the scene where many times officials, local officials, military operatives, security operatives are attacked. They think it is these kinds of people who point fingers to the military, who tip information to the OLA and lead to the assassination of the government officials. And they have been arresting many people like this. And Emmanuel when he was arrested, he was just one among many people who were arrested. But then they said, this guy has to be an example, a warning to other young people. And they brought him out and they put a gun on his neck. They marched him across the town, and they said that he has to chant, he has to say statements saying, everyone has to learn from me, that we should all denounce the OLA, OLF, Oneg Sheni. And if any of you support OLA, then you will be like me. And he calls on the young people to not associate themselves with the OLA, Oneg Sheni, etc. And they make him say this. And if you see the video, they say this, and they say to him, say this, and he says that, and they ask him to say more, and he says that many times, and they march him across the town, and they bring him to the square, and then they beat him, they abuse him, and finally they shoot him right there, and they killed him, reportedly in front of his own family as well, his mom and dad. And then, of course, he was, he gave his life in this way. And these are the kinds of acts of terrorism, the state terrorism that the government was inflicting and putting on spectacle so that the Oromo are silenced. It's not, the unique thing about this is not just that it is an arbitrary execution. It's not just that it is a public execution. It is a spectacle has been created. It has been a spectacle has been created around it, so that other Keros, other young people, learn a lesson or sense the warning coming from the government, that the government is brutal in its dealings with them. And that was, I think, an act of terror, and that was how it was perceived among Oromos. And that very same day, many young people flocked to the jungle to join the Oromo Liberation Army, and it didn't make Dambidolo any more peaceful to Abiy Ahmed ever since.
I should warn our viewers for this graphic video and picture, but I think, like you mentioned, this is a very good representation of what might have happened outside cameras, in rural areas where no information is accessible. This cruelty, this barbaric demonstration, and they ended up killing in public square, Amanel Wandamu, this way in the middle. And you have painted to us this picture that has been happening in Oromia the last 2-3 years. And we know that you are also mentioning about OLA, the Oromo Liberation Army, and there are other actors. Where Jawar is example for the Oromo Federation Federalist Congress, and we have OLF, the Oromo Liberation Front as well. And these are maybe the major actors outside the PP, the Prosperity Party by Abiy Ahmed. And January 7th, very few of these leaders were released, and you're connecting the dots in terms of what could come or what should come and what might not come as well in the coming months and so on. So maybe one question that comes to mind is, given the demographic size, the geographic side, and politically as well, even the last 50 years, 60 years, if you look at OLF, it has been an active, both in terms of material presence, but also more importantly, I think the social and psychological presence of the Oromo Liberation Front in the whole Ethiopia. So what should people expect? Maybe let me play this because people were asking, or people were waiting for Jawar Bakara Garba to speak, but you are saying they are not in that position now, maybe in the coming weeks or days. So this is when they were entering, I guess, their office in Addis. And not forget as well the recent, maybe months or weeks old massacre of Karayu Bagadas, right? So with that background, where is Oromia heading? Or to be specific, where is politics in Oromia heading? And maybe if you want to speak as well, if there is anything that we can share with our audience. Lemma was mentioned, as an important figure in the reform. I mean, but we don't hear about him at all. And people are still wondering if the system, or if Abiy can silence Lemma, then, despite their numbers, the Kerut, the Karis, what they are going through, what they have been going through, is something we should expect.
Well, first, let me backtrack a little bit about, to say a few things about Emmanuel and Ondumu's footage that you show there. In fact, the guy who makes him speak about Abatorbe, not directly OLA. Abatorbe is I think a guerrilla group that kind of lives with the people and takes some violent measures on state functionaries, local state functionaries. And other people are suspected to be informers of the Abatorbe. And one of the things that they were saying is, whoever supports Abatorbe, he's forced to say, whoever supports Abatorbe has to learn from me. So instead of directly referring to OLA, they were talking about Abatorbe. Abatorbe, of course, is OLA living in the people and taking some violent actions, measures on targeted state functionaries at the local level. So I wanted to add that for clarity purpose, because the wording doesn't refer to OLA or OLF. A second thing you mentioned is that the OLA is having a very powerful military and physical presence these days. And of course, this OLA is in some ways, indirectly, the creation of Abiy Ahmed himself. He could not consummate the peace deal made with the OLF that came back from Asmara. He could not negotiate a peace deal with the breakaway group, who refused to put down their arms until the peace deal, the terms of the peace deal are secured. And he actually said, we are going to eliminate them by force. And he started a military siege, and he launched a state of emergency. He proclaimed a state of emergency and launched military operatives, and then a siege and tactic of extermination by blocking them, blocking Wolega, blocking Guji and Borana zone from networks, from bank services, from markets, and from all sorts of access to humanitarian and social services. And of course, immediately after that, everyone who has been disillusioned with the reform promised by the Oromo protest movement have flocked to the jungle to join the Oromo Liberation Army. And those people who have been disarmed, demobilized, and saw that the reform is not in their favor, also had to go and rejoin their old army, and it was beefed up because of the tactical mistakes of Abiy Ahmed. And Abiy vindicated the fact that only military resistance, only armed resistance can actually sway, can actually force him to negotiation or to some gestures of recognition towards the Oromo. And everyone who waited, who pinned their hopes on peaceful political struggle have lost, and lost spectacularly, especially when the political leaders are arrested or assassinated and arbitrarily detained, and political parties are pushed out of the political space, and all peaceful Oromo media networks have been completely muzzled. When this happened to the Oromo public, it became very clear that armed resistance is the only way of talking back to Abiy Ahmed, talking back to empire, talking back to the Neftenyuch. Okay, and so Abiy made the OLA a plausible option. Abiy made the OLA to become the future of Oromia. Abiy made the OLF more radicalized and to take up a more angry face, such as the one that you see in the face of Marro, the Ribakum. So that has to be understood. And of course, the Oromo Liberation Front has always been identified with every single Oromo, because it's part of the making up of any young Oromo growing up in that country. It's not for its success, although it has succeeded in mobilizing the national sentiment and in organizing people and articulating their aspirations and so on and so forth. But more than its success, the symbolic significance of the Oromo Liberation Front as the only organization that gave an expression to the popular agency, to the popular sentiment to speak back against the Ethiopian empire. That is, I think, far-reaching in its consequences. So psychologically, it is the symbol of the survival. It is a symbol of resistance, a symbol of talking back to empire. And in that sense, every Oromo is, and that's why even the regime, whoever is not with them, because whoever is not with them is the OLF. It looms large. The OLF looms large in the psychological setup, in the mindset, in the political mindset of Oromo, the Oromo public. It is true. And so today, they seem to, their point has been vindicated. Most people who have been convinced that only peaceful struggle is the solution to the problems of Ethiopia have realized that, no, they were wrong. And that's why you see, especially in the diaspora, almost every single Oromo contributes to help the Oromo Liberation Army today, because they realized at last that Ethiopia is never going to even recognize them as people unless they put up an armed struggle, an armed resistance against empire. Now, I said earlier that the day Hachalu was assassinated and Jawar was arrested, the last bridge between Ethiopia and Oromia was broken. And indeed, nothing can reinforce that more than the chant that young men in Finfinne did. The chant said, just in the aftermath of the assassination of Hachalu and the arrest of Jawar and the entire political leadership, the chant goes like this: Hachalu moቷል, Jawar ይቀረናል. Hachalu is gone, Hachalu is dead, Jawar remains. So they were like biding time for the time when they will eliminate Jawar too. Now, what does that even mean? That basically means the last Oromo attempt to continue a peaceful struggle is only going to end up in prison or in death. And the likelihood is, by continuing to release more prisoners and approaching more localized Qero groups, he might bring on board many more Qeros, so that he would use them not only for the war in the north, but the war against the radical Amhara group in the Amhara National Regional State, particularly those who claim everywhere is their country and who want to eradicate the name Oromia from any territory that they think is theirs. Now, having said that about the Karayu, I think it is important that we talk about the Jawar and Baqqala situation. Now, the video that you played is a video of Jawar and Baqqala and other officials that were just newly released, going to meet up the party leader, the party chairman, the Oromo of the Oromo Federalist Congress, Professor Marara Guddina, and other officials. And they are, I think, having their first welcome back to the premises of the party office, where they are also meeting, welcoming in a way, Professor Marara Guddina himself, who has been for about 3 or 4 months since August away to the United States, and who just came back a few days ago after their release. I think he went there around January 10 or 12. So they are meeting there for the first time. This is now the leadership team, except Jawar. All the others are in the central committee and the executive committee. Jawar is just a member who joined them last year. I mean, a year and a half before, about half a year before he was arrested. So that was the event. They were basically welcoming them back to the office, welcoming Professor Marara back to the country, and kind of celebrating and just seeing each other physically and telling their supporters that you are back and our politics is alive. But they didn't say much. You didn't hear any statement at this point in time. They didn't give any press statement. In fact, you see how Jawar is very measured in his greetings to the people. He salutes, they just say like this, and that's it. He doesn't speak. He just goes, slips away from the camera. So you see how many things are being contained even within the party. Containment is not a good sign. There is a lot of tension that's bubbling up, but for now contained. And we are going to see how they will finally come out and state what they went through and what they are up to in the coming days and months. Now, what should people expect given the circumstances? There is the Ola fighting in the jungle. There is the Ola TDF alliance, the broader alliance within the United Front, the framework of the United Front. And the Oromo people are not happy, as you can see. Yes, Jawar and Baqqala and these leaders are freed, but the Oromo people are not going crazy about celebrating this. There is some kind of suspense in the air. People not knowing exactly what is going on. They were not happy because this is not a complete moment of a complete joy, because the release is not complete itself. They are not happy because the war hasn't stopped. They were not happy their land is not secure. They are not happy the drones haven't stopped and the siege didn't stop in Wulaga, in other parts. And people are just waiting. In fact, waiting largely upon what Jawar and Baqqala do and what Abiy will do in terms of releasing the other political prisoners. From what I hear, the news is that Jawar and Baqqala were not told exactly the terms of their release, what the terms of their release is. In fact, the negotiators are other people, such as, I hear that Len Cholota is part of it. The negotiators just said to Jawar and Baqqala that Abiy has accepted all the things that you have demanded, and now it's time to go free. And in actual fact, what they said to Abiy also is that Jawar has accepted all the things that you want from him. But in actual fact, Abiy's terms are very limiting to Jawar, and Jawar didn't know what to make of it. And it is, by the way, there was no court order, there was no police order, there is no prosecution later telling them why they were supposed to be freed. And the terms of freedom wasn't clear. And Jawar actually was protesting, and he was actually getting physical with the officials, saying, I would rather die here. I am arrested and my case is taken to law, and only through the law that you can release me. I don't know where you are taking me. If you want to kill me right here. And he literally went physical with them. And the other friends who were with him, I spoke to most of them, And they say, we didn't know. We were just told to go out. We didn't even pick up our phones, our properties. We just were rushed to the car. And when we came out, we saw Joe fighting with the officials. And he remained to be unhappy. And then he met the officials for the first time in Tuesday after their release, I think 3 or 4 days later, in the Ministry of Justice. They met the Attorney General or the Minister of Justice, Gideon Timotheus, where they were told, and they were given papers now, saying that their case has been discontinued for the purpose of facilitating an inclusive dialogue to happen in the country. And of course, the release of Sabahat Tsegaye and the rest is done through, because of considering the humanitarian situation, the health and age situation that they are in. And this is what they heard. Other than that, they don't know. But I think in their interaction with the negotiators, they realized that they have been betrayed. I mean, this is not what he expected, I am told. This is not what he expected. And so, given the circumstances, there were thousands of people in prison and the whole country is at war, I don't think Jawar will be happy to be released alone and then being co-opted to support Abiy in his last attempt to stay in power. I don't think so. But we're going to see what they are going to say, and we're going to see what the impact of what they say in the trajectory that we find ourselves in now. In this light, what do we expect? The Oromo people know what they want. I think crucial to the situation now is the unconditional cessation of hostilities. If anything is going to come to help anything at all, there must be basic peace and stability in the country. For that, Abiy Ahmed alone has the key, and he can do so. And the key is to stop the war, to stop the drone attacks, to stop the armed groups, formal and informal, that attack people. That's number one. And second, the demand from the Oromo Liberation Army, for example, is to stop the war, stop armed belligerent forces who are attacking our people, and remove your army and take them to the barrack. All right, and make sure that humanitarian support aid is made accessible to the people, and free all political prisoners, and create a free political space where Oromo politicians can act as they wish. And through this, we can begin to talk about politics. Until that happens, we don't talk politics at all. This is the perspective of the Oromo Liberation Army. This is the perspective of the TDF. This is the perspective of the United Front. Now, the Oromo people, on the other hand, obviously, for now and for their future, they want to assert their collective agency. They want to regain the capacity to determine their destiny, whether this is the time for them to negotiate their place in Ethiopia. Are they going to stay in or go apart from Ethiopia? This has never been done. The people have never determined. And over the years, it has created ambivalence among some of the Oromo elite, especially the middle class and on, because they always vacillate between democratization and decolonization, as an option. And for the first time, whoever has some doubts has to be given the chance to collectively express their voice and to determine their destiny, to stay with or to stay away from Ethiopia. That's the second important thing that they want to have. And thirdly, they want to protect, secure, and live in their land peacefully, because the land has become a dangerous place. Oromia has become a dangerous place. It's a place of scramble for resources. The Oromo land is a matter of sale now, a matter for sale. It is a commodity over which any political elite fights, and the land is a curse for Oromo. The resource is a curse for Oromo. Therefore, until they regain capacity to control, own their own land, their own territory, secure their territory, secure the survival of Oromo as a nation, Oromia as a legal entity. Until that happens, no Oromo is safe. You can single out one Oromo, and that's why cooptation becomes possible. You can single out one Oromo or one group of Oromos, depending on religion, depending on class, depending on region, and then play that against another Oromo. That is not an expression of collective agency. That is an expression, that's a way of buying out some and excluding the Oromo by including some of your choicest Oromos. So you have your own house Oromos, and that they are used to exclude the field Oromos, to use the language of Malcolm X. And then, of course, the Oromo interest at this point in time is only two: to survive and resist imperial hegemony, surviving imperial backlash. Abiy's dispensation can only be summarized in Oromia as the imperial backlash, the empire striking back, and mainly targeting Oromia and the wider southern people. This is a messianic regime that wanted to save Ethiopia from Oromos and others. And the only thing that is now pressing for Oromos is, how do we survive this empire, its legacies, its afterlife, its different version? And how do we, in order to survive it, put up a resistance that will lead to assertion of our collective agency so that we can determine our destiny? And of course, with or outside of Ethiopia, the Oromo want to live in dignity, in peace, and freedom, and in equality as human beings. And this is what Abiy's regime is fighting against. You cannot be organized as an Oromo, as Oromos. You cannot be having your own political entity called Oromia. You cannot, survive as Ethiopians in that way. You cannot assert this nationalism. It is us or it's us or you. So obviously, it is not going to be Ethiopia. It's not going to be us. You have to be eliminated. And this kind of posturing makes the Oromo very vulnerable to only hang on instinct of survival, instinct of resistance. And so the want is obvious. If we can live in dignity, in peace, in freedom, and equality on our land, then we begin to talk about politics. So it's beyond politics. By the way, people often ask that Oromos might go for self-determination. Of course, the issue of self-determination is a technical legal matter. It's not a political matter anymore. It's a technical legal matter. No one can do politics around it. And this is precisely why Abiy and the group want to actually repeal the article dealing with self-determination, and they rework the constitutional system. But in actual fact, the self-determination issue is a legal matter. It's a settled matter. So whoever talks about self-determination, you just have to go and apply and do the process. It's only procedural matter. It should not come into a political debate at all. It's a technical matter. So that shouldn't be a matter to fear. But what we have to fear is the violence that precedes, the violence that is making it impossible to do politics, to even table the issue of national self-determination, to table a referendum, and so on and so forth. So there is the immediate problem of war and violence, the overt war, the overt violence that is manifested through war, and the covert and structural violence that is meted into the bureaucracy, the military, the intelligence, and the school and the economic system that inflicts Oromos today and the entire other peoples of Ethiopia to exclude, marginalize, and keep them at a second, as second citizens. And there is this maneuvering of co-optation of the elite into the system only to exclude the large majority, the vast majority of the population. So the first thing is stop the war, create a general atmosphere of peace and stability so that there will be a conducive political climate, a conducive political ecology where you can negotiate, you can take political or legal action to assert your rights and so on and so forth. That's number one. Second, make sure that all the people that need humanitarian aid get it in time before they perish, and the many are perishing by the day. And third, disarm all these warlords that are armed to destabilize the country. If that happens, I think the rest is politics and law. The self-determination issue, whether Ethiopia survives or not, whether there will be cessation of Tigray, cessation of Oromia, cessation of Ogaden, etc. And I think it is going to be possible now. But it's a matter of technical. It's a matter of a technical matter of law. But you have to be having peace, then politics, before you get to the law. So stop the war, get humanitarian assistance, stabilize the country, free the political prisoners, talk politics, talk about provisional government, transitional government, then table the agenda. Outstanding questions that have to be settled legally, which is through referendum. So that's the way. Now, Lemma Magarsa, you mentioned. I hear that there is this news, I think snippets of news on social media that Lemma is back to Oromia, and I believe that is a lie. I know that Lemma is not in Ethiopia yet. I believe that his political career has ended in 2021 when he left the country, and he works for FAO, and most of his time he's in Rome and sometimes with his family in the United States. And he doesn't have any contact with any politician whatsoever, and he doesn't even contact the activists and the people in the diaspora most of the times. I remember only one time when he spoke to a personal friend, a common friend, about some of the things that we are doing in the Oromo World Congress, but it's just a personal reflection on that. Other than that, he doesn't, and he's talking to a personal friend who is a businessman, actually, not even a politician. And I don't think he is part of the political equation in the near future, in the foreseeable future. But why is his news, is the news of his coming back? Who is actually blowing out this news of his coming back to Ethiopia? Most of them are the OPP fellows, the Abiy's Oromo Prosperity Party, social media activists. They are talking about Lemma coming back. You know why? Abiy is they want to create this facade that Abiy is making peace with Oromos. He has released Jawar. He has now made peace with Lemma, and therefore the pendulum has shifted now. His constituency was the Amhara region so far. Now it is going to be Oromia, and by so doing, he's going to get some respite. He's going to extend his tenure in power. He's going to stay in power. So because it serves this purpose, they spread this news. And also giving the impression that it's not that Jawar has been released, but also Lemma, who has been pushed away because of the insistence of the Amhara wing of Prosperity Party, mind you, by the way. It was only to please them that Lemma had to be kicked out, by the way, because he's an Oromo nationalist, and they gave him a precondition. We can continue to work with you only if you shade Oromo nationalists around you. And you know how demonized Lemma was when he was accused of talking about demographic change around Finfinne. And it was the entire Amhara media and political establishment that was running against him. And it was that pressure that led Abiy to push him out. And now the idea of the talk about bringing Lemma back is saying, look, well, we have Jawar and Bekele and some Oromo politicians are released. And now I'm going to bring Lemma back. And guys, I have an advantage over you now. If you don't behave, and if you don't accept the kind of maneuvering I am doing in relation to Tsegaye and in relation to Oromia, then tough luck on you. We are going to come for you, against you, come for you. I think that's the communication to the Amhara National Regional States elite, who are now completely angry. They felt betrayed by Abiy, and he's saying it has eclipsed now. You know, this is the base, and this is very strong. This is very solid. In actual fact, that's not what it is. He's trying to buy time, and I think the issue of Lemma is a dead and closed issue, and he said officially he is not official, but he has already himself said that his political career has come to an end.
Maybe we will go to the final question, but this I think must be a breaking news, at least for me, that he is no more. I mean, in terms of political career, that he's working for the FAO, the Food Organization, in Rome. Maybe if you can shed a very small light on the push of Lemma outside the political spectrum. How was it possible for Abiy to do that, given the Lemma's political capital he had, given that everything from even the team was named after him, Team Lemma, and so on, right? So we are not talking about now Abiy the military man or the whatever we can call him. He was Lemma was pushed early on. So was there anything that Abiy had that Lemma didn't, or was it because it happened before the arrest of Jawar, before the killing of Hachalu, all that? So if you can shed light, that would be great.
Yeah, and by the way, the fact that Lemma's political career has ended doesn't mean that there are no people who want Lemma to be back. I know that some of the political leadership who have just been released want Lemma to be back. In fact, one of the conditions they were putting out is that even when we talked about the United Front and the alliance between TDF and OLA, some of the people who have just been released have been saying you also should consider people like Lemma and inside dissidents from within OPDO itself, OPP itself. And so there are many people who actually think that Lemma is still viable and Lemma should be part of the equation. And there are foreigners who still think that Lemma should be part of the equation. And so the fact that his political career has ended is only predicated upon his own choice. Many people still keep the hope, hold the hope out. And of course, the Oromo public feels betrayed because he never spoke up. At least he could have spoken up. That's what people are saying. Why is he?
But is it possible that he was subject of blackmailing? Was there anything that Abiy had hands on in terms of silencing him?
Well, I think two things I should say. I think it is safe to say Lemma had made a tactical blunder when he gave the chance for Abiy to lead rather than taking the helm of power by himself. Okay, I think that was a tactical blunder, but one has to take risks when you make that kind of decision in 2017. In 2017, the OPDO was basically trying to age out TPLF from power and not to miss the opportunity for power to fall in the hands of the Oromo part of EPRDF, especially given the fact that the shakeup came because of the Oromo protest movement. Right? And so if the reform is forced up on the regime by Oromia, then the Oromo wing of EPRDF, they thought, should have the clout, should have the age to take over the power and to reform EPRDF in such a way that it can accommodate the popular demands of the time. All right, that was the calculation. Now, in order for, Lemma Magarsa or OPDO chair was made the chairman of EPRDF. If Opidio is going to lead EPRDF, it means the leader of EPRDF has a parliamentary majority to become a prime minister. All right. But Lemma is the leader of Opidio and the president of the regional government. Prior to that, he was the spokesperson of Chafe Oromia, the Oromia legislature, not a member of the Ethiopian parliament. And even if his party has a majority seat in the parliament, he is not an elected representative in the federal parliament. Therefore, even if he is the chairman of Opidio, he will not have the chance to become prime minister. So they had to make a choice. And at the time, one of the things that was suggested is, and then of course it becomes a matter of competence. If Lemma is not going to be there, then somebody competent must be taking up the position of prime minister. And in order for competence, you have to have two kinds of competence. One, popular mandate and legal competence. And second is the actual political capability to maneuver and manage the federal government. And Lemma will have the legal hurdle that he cannot meet because he's a member of the Oromia, the state parliament, not the federal parliament. And Abiy is a member of the federal parliament, okay? And nobody knows what Abiy's plan is. Of course, he's part of the membership of the leadership of Opidio, part of the leadership of EPRDF, part of the leadership of against which the people protested. He was the minister at the time. So nobody knows even if whether he is for the reform or not. But he has been planning for this for a long, long time, hatched by even the American government, the CIA for a long time. As you know, he's on the payroll of CIA, even to date as an informer. And he has been hatched to take up position someday, immediately. I think they approached him since the time he was, Meles Zenawi passed away. And they have confided to one of my friends, some of the people now who have been released from prison. The State Department has confided to him that to one of them that they have been preparing him for 7 years and they don't have anyone else to replace him. So that you have to give him at least 5 years and so on and so forth. But in 2017, when the choice of leadership came, it was possible for Lemma to get elected to the federal parliament through a snapshot election, and then to prop him up for prime minister. But Opidio considered it difficult, A, to run an election, and B, to take the risk by giving it to him, because the TPLF will come back and says, well, this guy does not have the legal competence to take up the power, therefore, they will look for somebody else who has a federal seat. And there was also another demon they are afraid of. There are other competitors who wanted to take the help, who are not necessarily for the reform. So they said, in the end, let the reform win. And of course, they are close friends, close allies for many years. And he trusted him for some reasons. And he didn't tell us why we should trust him. And he just let him take the position of prime minister. And in fact, one of the reasons we say whether Abiy stood for reform or not wasn't clear was because when there was a time, the parliament was voting on the lifting up of the state of emergency of the time. And Abiy's vote was expected, and the entire Opidio members and the Amhara National Regional State members voted against him. Abiy, whose vote was going to prove that he is for reform, wasn't even there. He was walking around the city. He was in Finfinne. I know about it. I know for a fact. He was around there. He didn't vote. Why? Because he was afraid of the TPLF, or he was afraid that he might, at some point they might force him to, if his plan for premiership will falter. Somehow he had to miss that vote. And that is when nobody knew whether he is for power or for reform. And so Lemma made this tactical blunder when he trusted Abiy over his own instinct. And that's number one. The second is he thought he underestimated him. Okay, he has taken up the federal power. And he's talking about something that we haven't even thought about. And he actually came on VOA and told Jalani that the popular demands that we promised to address are not addressed. They are not even touched so far. He said this, and this is where our disagreement lies, he said, on VOA. He said, the priority is not creating a new party called Prosperity out of the old. The priority is addressing our popular demands. We have a duty to respond to the popular demands, and we are not anywhere close there. And this is a point of difference, and we will solve it. We were hoping, and he said, we're going to come out to speak about this in detail in the coming weeks and days. And that was it. That's the last time we heard from him. And so in the process, and I've been in constant engagement with him, he said he underestimated Abiy. He said, I think this is what he's going to do. I think he's going to blatantly, flaunt the law and all the party law, the constitution, and so on and so forth. He says, I don't think so. He wouldn't do that. And then he always thinks that he has the law on his side, he has the party on his side, and said, what can he do? He can't be doing this. And he was always surprised to us. And he goes to a meeting and watches the situation and looks at the people and comes out shocked. Oh my gosh. And then we ask him, so what's next? Nothing, Malfit. What is he going to do? So I think Abiy has been underestimated by many people, including myself. And it is, in fact, the fact that he is underestimated has played to his advantage. And the Amhara elite in the NDM, the Amhara elite in the Ethiopian political establishment, all of them underestimated him. And it's precisely that position of being underestimated that gave him an edge over them. He always takes them by surprise. He is not afraid of taking risks. He's not afraid of lying. He's not afraid of defying all kinds of laws and scruples. He's not. Nobody would, as any, people who have grown up in Ethiopia, they struggle with a scruple. They struggle with tactics, and they kind of, no, not so Abiy. Abiy a different species in that regard. He just makes mistakes, and he tells you it is the ultimate truth. And then the next day he said, we made a mistake back then. And he's not. So that complete defiance of all expectations, defiance of the underestimation, has, I think, led him to where he is. And of course, the support of the international community, the support in particular of the Trump administration, that even led to the Nobel Peace Prize, and the fact that the international community is, I must say, fickle, to be honest. They see only the facade, not the real thing going on. And that has played to his advantage. In the end, what does it mean? In modern day politics, truth doesn't matter much. It's the way you play your lie to delude the mass. And Abiy, as you know, is very photogenic. He goes around. For him, impression is much more important than substance. And this is not the tradition among many Ethiopian politicians. They don't do this at all. And he knew that media and these impressionist tactics will sway at least the international media. And if you have international legitimacy, what happens at home doesn't matter. And it comes from his being an operator, an intelligence operator, who believes, as a matter of orthodoxy, that information is all there is, whether it is a lie or true. Information is all there is to politics. You spread this information, you govern the country through that information. And this is ingrained in any person that has been an operative of the intelligence, and at least the Ethiopian intelligence. And he capitalized on that. He went on. He's not afraid of lying. He's not afraid of contradicting himself. He doesn't care. He doesn't have any compass. As you know, his political party program is not a program at all. He doesn't have any ideology. He's ideologically completely empty. All these things have helped. So in times when only impression and fast media images mean much more than actual truth and commitment to principles, ideological purity, and so on and so forth, it helped him to carry the day. And the international support, of course, has played quite a role in propping him up. And even today, every time I speak to parliamentarians, I speak to international community leaders, one of the things they say is, if not Abiy, then who? You know, they fear the void. And after Abiy, they see only void. They can't see anything else. And if not him, then who? And if we don't know who, then what is going to happen to the Horn of Africa region? TPLF, you think they will, you know, or OLA, you think they will be able to stabilize the country and stabilize the region? So that's the kind of fear that he manipulates and plays. And as you can see, sometimes he bashes the West and he talks about the neocolonialism and so on and so forth. And then next day he begs the West and he pretends like he's their man. One day he is for Africa. The next day he completely ignores Africa and does it with the Middle East and so on and so forth. Someday he is a peaceful man, a Nobel Peace Prize. Another day he is the warrior who vows to kill and destroy. And that's him. And at this point in time, he's a problem even for the international community. If not because he has brought about lots of destruction, at least he has brought about lots of shame. They don't know what to do, how to deal with it. And that is what happened. And Lemma made a tactical blunder and he did not know. You see, in politics, timing and decision is important. At first, he made a tactical mistake. He knew it. To redeem himself, he had opportunities. He didn't seize upon that opportunity. And over time, he was actually trampled upon and pushed out. And in fact, he was almost killed had it not been for the intervention of the American embassy, by the way. He was almost killed. And they actually, what they did was they said, he's not going to contact anyone. So no phone. And Abiy is not going to kill him. And so much so that he has to be closed in his own house, to the extent that for months, he and his security officials, 6 of them, were feeding from one fridge, and they had nothing to eat. And for 3 months, Abiy actually removed the security details, and they said, we're not going to go leaving him to death. We can't leave him. And so for 3 months, they were unpaid, and their family was starving. In the end, they had to beg for food, literally. And someone had to be flown from Minnesota to go and find him an apartment. And someone from big official, wife of a big official in Oromia, in Ethiopia, one of the giants of the last few years, decades in the Ethiopian politics, the wife of that person had to go crying to bring food to them. That was how he lived. You remember how he was disheveled and completely run down at some point in time. That was the moment when Abiy actually removed the security, said, we're not going to go because he would be killed. And they stayed with him for 3 months. Their family starved, they starved, he starved with them. And he was not paid. And he was not able to contact anyone. In fact, the American diplomats took his phone away from him to be sure that he will not communicate, exciting Abiy to come and do the murder. That's how he lived. And finally, it is the American friends that negotiated a job for him in the Food and Agriculture Organization. And they are the ones who managed to negotiate his exit from Ethiopia. And the day his political career ended was the day he chose to keep quiet, to stop Abiy in his attempt to transform the party from Opidio to Bilsigana, to prosperity. And that day, the real concern from the part of Lemma was, I think that is genuine. Said, okay, we can stop this guy. Then what? Then what? We can stop this guy. We can take over power. Then what? You see, he has a sense of responsibility. And of course, with that, a fear of risk. Okay? But the sense of responsibility is from another age. And in the end, he that is more irresponsible, more risk-taking, more unscrupulous, won over the one that is more responsible, the more scrupulous one, the one that is more risk averse. And this has happened to Lemma, this has happened to Jawar, this has happened to Bakala, and this continues to happen. This happened to the TPLF leaders, by the way.
Yeah.
They could stop him at a number of levels. They were saying, we would be considered as opposing the reform, and it doesn't look good on us. Let's see how, they could have taken a legal action, they could have taken a political action, they could have stopped them. They always said they were taking the more responsible position, the more principled position. Everyone who played in terms of principles with Abiy lost. Only the unscrupulous, the treasonous, who allied themselves with him, who were former enemies, deadly enemies of the EPRDF group, they survived. And they changed courts. They turned out to be, what they call turncoats. They just changed and came up with him, and they defended him, and they sponsored his war. And today, you see, if they continue, they are like, they are the same, having no principles, no values, no scruples. In that sense, they are the same. They are only people who consider power, and they know how to play the power game. But then it is only a matter of time until they come against each other, and we are already seeing the signs. And so I think Lemma first made a tactical blunder, then he became too responsible really. I applaud his responsibility, but I think he was a little too responsible, and he gave in to Abiy's maneuvers, and that's what led us here.
Great. I think that the last few minutes really uncovered the anatomy of the politics, if you can call it politics, of Abiy, and how we ended up here. So maybe the last question is, we are talking about our viewers, we are talking about Oromia, Quo Vadis Oromia. And one thing that people talk about, you also outlined the peaceful civil resistance that brought Abiy to power, that is an alternative still. And the military engagement by OLA is another alternative. And maybe that was pushing to national dialogue is what others are hoping as well might come true. So recently, just this week, this is signatories of, I think, over 60 civil society communities, community associations of Oromo communities around the globe, I must say, signing for the establishment of National Dialogue Commission. I think tomorrow there will be a start of Global Oromo campaign on national dialogue on the same subject, Wednesday, the 26th of January. And yesterday came up again another article on FP, the foreign policy. Ethiopia's national dialogue needs to include everyone. So there seems to be, all this has to do one way or another to Oromia, even if the national dialogue national is Ethiopia, right? So what is your take on the national dialogue, the way it has been prescribed, designed by the Abiy regime, but also, again, talking about the international community? These were considered the panacea of Ethiopia's problems before the election, after the election, all that. So with that, we'll finish today's show. So Dr. Tsegaye, just again, give us your insight on what all this is about.
Yeah, Abiy's national dialogue is not for peace and reconciliation. Abiy's national dialogue is not even about dialogue. Abiy's national dialogue is a way of changing the narrative in the international media outlets about Ethiopia only being going to war, creating all sorts of atrocities, being castigated in the Human Rights Council, being discussed in the UN Security Council, etc. That narrative has to change. This is what the OPP, the Oromo Prosperity Party, has decided. And there are documents that show this, written about 6 months or so ago. And so the national dialogue narrative has to dominate the international media. And we are becoming, they say, diplomatically, in fact, they say, after winning the war, we lost the diplomacy, they say. We have won the war, we have destroyed EPLF. But our diplomacy is not correct. What happened? Internationally, we are accused of committing genocide. We are accused of perpetrating all sorts of atrocity. We are even discussed in the Human Rights Council. And of course, the West is doing it for its own national interest, for its interventionist imperial interest, and not respecting our sovereignty and so on and so forth. But we need to change that. They said we need to change that immediately after they realized that they cannot fight the war against Tigray, after they are spectacularly defeated, and they admitted to their own party members that they have no military and political capability to continue the war against Tigray beyond the borders of the Amhara region. So what shall we do? Number one, change the narrative in the international media outlets. How do we do so? Talking about peace. And by the way, the tactical retreat of the TDF to give peace a chance was also issued at that time because they wanted to undo this plan of changing narrative in the name of national dialogue. So when they announced it then, it fell through. Nobody could listen because the TDF came out and said, we have pulled back our army. We are trying to give peace a chance. But nobody is impressed when they talk about, when later the Ethiopian government talked about national dialogue. Then they kept quiet. They went to the parliament and they issued a legislation that establishes a National Dialogue Commission, and they even began to talk about the peoples to be nominated for the National Dialogue Commission. Now that, its primary goal was, number one, to take the narrative dominance about Ethiopia. The headlines should not be only talking about war, we should be leading it towards talking about peace. That's number one. Number two, at home, we should focus on Oromia. On Tigray, we should do only a technologically aided selective operations to kill the TPLF leaders and to destroy training and economic facilities through drones and air air force, right? And that will be where it stops. So they were asked, are you going to invite TPLF and TDF and the OLA? They said, we will invite them. If they accept it, and they said there is a likelihood that they don't accept it, and we want them not to accept it. If they don't accept it, we will expose them to the international community as saying that they are refusing any peace gesture, our peace gesture. They are declining to accept our peace gesture. If they do accept it and start negotiating with us, then we'll trace them and geolocate them and kill them. And through that, we give the war a conclusion. All right. So that's why you see when Obasanjo goes to Mekelle, then they have the drone attack on that particular area. And all the time they were trying to target the killing of the leaders. And the same is happening. They think by killing the elders, they can finish the war. All the time. By killing Merro, then they finish the war. And that's why they were being targeting only them and the camps. Now, so that's what we do. So it's not about, they are not included. But for international purpose, we will say, we'll also invite them. But if you look at the law and the discourse within, and the subject, the thing that they want to discuss in the national dialogue, they said, we discuss on issues related to national anthem, national emblem, national flag, national language, and some of the principles that are included in the Constitution without the agreement of our peoples. So it is basically about federalism and self-determination and the right to organize politics around ethnic groups and so on and so forth. And this is basically an in-house thing. It's not about the major contenders or stakeholders of Ethiopian politics. Okay, they were basically saying, how do we make Prosperity Party compatible with Ijema? How do we make Prosperity Party with the aspirations of the Amhara elite? And that's basically an in-house dialogue that they want to do, mainly to simply destroy what the federalist framework and the constitutional framework that has been in place for the last 30 years. So that's basically what the national dialogue is about. Now, but they want to capitalize on it in order to change the narrative in the international news media. As for the dialogue itself, although because every time the issue of dialogue came up, the foreigners, the Westerners were saying, first release the prisoners, the political prisoners. In their absence, the dialogue cannot be accepted. And if it's not accepted, then it's dead on arrival. So now he was trying to make this gesture by selectively releasing some of the politicians who actually are not even invited to be part of the dialogue. And I don't think they will even take the position to participate in the dialogue if they are invited. But they are not even invited. I don't think Abiy would want to sit down with Jawar and Bakala and Marara to talk about the national dialogue, because they will raise fundamental questions, and those questions are basically the questions that they wanted to completely shut out of the political space. And I don't think even Jawar and Bakala and the OFC will welcome a national dialogue without first releasing the political prisoners and stopping the war and getting humanitarian aid to those in need, etc., etc. They need a comprehensive peace. Now, one thing we should underscore is there is no dialogue without peace. The country is at war. If there is no peace, there is no dialogue. If there is no dialogue, there is no politics. So this is the understanding of most of the Oromo civic associations across the globe. And I, representing JIRA, am one of the co-signers of that document of the civic organizations. One of the things that it says is, the fear is, by the way, on our part, the fear is that the international community, which is very lazy and who would want to have some kind of peace, unjust, improperly negotiated, uninclusive, it doesn't matter, some kind of peace, some kind of engagement. They just want to see some kind of engagement for them to feel good about stopping the genocide, stopping the war, and getting some help. You know, that's basically what it is. And they're so desperate, for example, some of the members of the European Union, such as Germany, for example, some other countries as well, they just want to give this national dialogue a chance. And if the parliament passes it, they want to throw money onto it, and Abiy is already asking for it. And if one of them jump to it, then the others would follow. They don't want, the one thing that the international community hates is to be left out and left behind, because they want to have their, they want to be in the loop, if for nothing to get information, and they don't want to be singled out as an enemy of the Ethiopian state, etc. So if one supports it, then they are going to go in groups. And if they do so, this blatantly illegitimate national dialogue is going to take a swing. And how is it going to play out? No Oromo representation, no Tagaru representation. The war is going on. Humanitarian aid is not reaching our people. Political prisoners are languishing in the prisons. And Abiy is talking about national dialogue. The problem now is allowed to simmer by the international community blinding itself to the war, because there is some dialogue. They have an excuse. It's a way of masking the war and blinding the conscience of the international community to the actual genocide that is going on in the country. So we said, at least we they need to see the Oromo position, the Oromo consensus document. That's what the statement is about, which spells out that there are preconditions for any meaningful national dialogue to occur. The preconditions are the release of all Oromo political prisoners, the unconditional cessation of hostilities by stopping the drone attacks, by stopping the war, the military operations in Wulaga, in Borana-Guji, in Shoa. Okay, and then, of course, by allowing humanitarian access to all people that are in need. As you know, in Oromia, there is mass starvation created by the government as well as by drought. And humanitarian aid is absolutely necessary. Thirdly, there has to be general stability and peace in the country. For national dialogue to happen, there must be a peace, it must be inclusive. And of course, the government says it is inclusive. By inclusive, it means the ones that are in parliament or who have taken part in not in parliament, the ones who have taken part in the last election. Okay, and that's not inclusive. But as a gesture of inclusive, now I have released the political prisoners of OFC. If they come into the dialogue, that's up to them. If they don't come into the dialogue, then it's not my problem. You know, I have done my best. So the thing is, in short, a way of giving Abiy Ahmed a new lease of life, a new lease of life in power. And that's all it does. And the international community wants to secure, as you have seen many times, he's a legitimate government, etc., etc. That's the kind of language they speak. They want to make sure that he feels safe and secure in his power, but they want to also put pressure on him to stop the war and to somehow allow access to humanitarian aid. Abiy has vowed several times, including yesterday, to completely eliminate his Tigrayan adversaries and eliminate his Oromo adversaries. And he's never going to stop that. But at this point in time, because he can't, he has to create some mask around it. And so the Oromo consensus statement was issued to make sure that the world knows that at least the Oromo public, if there is going to be a dialogue, then it can happen only on the basis of these preconditions and in this order, in this sequence of priorities. So we articulated that and we co-signed that statement. Now, there are many who have been saying that the national dialogue, as it stands now, as it is conceived by the government, is not a dialogue at all. It's at best fake. It's a lame gesture to show that Abiy is for peace when he's actually conducting and prosecuting war. Therefore, there are many who say there cannot be dialogue without the inclusion of all stakeholders, including the Oromo political parties. Number two, in order for that to happen, all of the political leaders must be freed. Number three,
I think we are having issues with Dr. Tsagaye's connection. Until he comes back, let me just do some ad. Yes, he's back, but I just in the meantime I will do this ad. So tomorrow we will have the UMD news update with Shimelis Marassa Gabra Mikael, both in Amharic and English. So we'll have a new segment, a new news bulletin by journalist Shimelis Marassa Gabra Mikael. Dr. Tsegaye is back. You may continue. Yeah, there was a disconnection, I guess.
So yeah. So everyone knows that these conditions have to be met. To be any interruption, I guess. Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So there cannot be any dialogue without all these preconditions are met. And it is in that light that the Oromo diaspora, I think one group particularly working in the United States, is running a weekly Wednesday evening campaign on various issues, including freedom of prisoners so far. And now they were basically saying a campaign for a genuine dialogue, not a fake dialogue, this one. In fact, they reiterate in some of the proposed campaign, they actually say that there should be a stoppage of the war, a cessation of hostilities, the freedom of release of all political prisoners, general freedom for political parties and media outlets. And it's only in that context that an inclusive national dialogue can happen. So basically, the campaign is not for a national dialogue. The campaign is protesting against Abiy's fake national dialogue, just like the consensus statement issued by the 64 civic associations, Oromo civic associations from across the globe. And so tonight, I think that conversation will go on, that campaign, Twitter campaign will go on to say that this dialogue is a non-starter. In fact, that's what he says in the ad that you brought out. He says it's a non-starter. The dialogue conceived by Abiy Ahmed, as far as the Oromo is concerned, it is a non-starter. While conducting war on our people, while arresting, at least tens of thousands of prisoners are suffering, ethnic profiling and detention in known and unknown places is continuing. We cannot sit down and have a national dialogue. As for the OLA, only proper legitimate voice for the Oromo public at this point in time, free voice. As for the OLA and TDF has an alliance. OLA and is part of the United Front. For them, any negotiation with Abiy Ahmed to a longer ceasefire can only start when he stops the war, when he stops this vow to eliminate them. Okay, when he opens, he stops the siege, when he allows humanitarian aid to the people, when he retracts his military, the barrack, returns them to the barrack, when he removes the Eritrean forces and all foreign elements, because they are spoilers. And in fact, one of the slogans in the campaign tonight is remove Eritrean forces from Oromia. Intelligence and security forces in operation. In Wallaga, they are basically the ones to fight. The ENDF is an onlooker, by the way. It's the Amhara forces and the Isaias forces that are fighting the people, the OLA. The ENDF, except the special commando that was trained in 2014, according to Ethiopian calendar, but 170 of them were liquidated just last week. There was nothing fighting. It is the Eritrean forces and the Amhara forces, special forces that are fighting. So unless these people are out, and unless everyone goes back to the status quo ante, then there can't be any negotiation. If you can't negotiate with them, and if you can't stop the war, then there can't be any national dialogue. It's just an exercise in pretension.
I think that completes our conversation today. Thank you, Dr. Tsegaye. And to be continued. Actually, we need to do this kind of dialogue, this kind of, conversation about understanding. You mentioned about the laziness of the international community. I think that's a critical element in all this. And we hope with what we did today, there is a better understanding of the parameters, the anatomy of a possible national dialogue in Oromia and more in Ethiopia at large. Thank you for your time, and to be continued.
Thank you so much, Gedish. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, have a good
Sorry
night.
for the long-winded conversation we had today.
No, I enjoyed every bit of that. Thank you so much. You have been following us live on Facebook and YouTube, UMD Media Show, conversation with Dr. Tsegaye Ararssa. He's a legal academic and very outspoken on the side of the people in terms of atrocities happening in Oromia and in Ethiopia at large. And he has been conversing with me on Quo Vadis Oromia. So he painted a good picture of what is happening in Oromia now and what might happen and what should happen given the circumstance. So please subscribe, share, like, so that many can access this material and other shows we do. And tomorrow there will be an English and Amharic version of Media's news update and news plotting by Shimalis Marassa Gabramikael. Thank you for your time, for staying with us. That is today's show, and on Friday, the weekly H panel will be there, but 1 hour earlier. So we'll be meeting live. We'll be live on Facebook and YouTube at 8 p.m. Eastern Time instead of the usual 9 p.m. Bye from here, your host, ጌታቸው አሰፋ. Thank you so much.